Hello, and welcome to the Hope Unlocked podcast. I'm your host, Kristen Kurtz, and I'm also the founder of New Wings Coaching, where I empower and unlock women to soar in their calling and roar with their voices. If you're curious to learn more about how coaching can help you unlock your potential, be sure to explore the show notes for ways to connect with me further. Get ready to dive in as we uncover empowering keys and insights in this episode. So tune in and let's unlock hope together. Welcome to the Hope Unlocked podcast. I'm Kristen Kurtz, your host. I pray this episode is like a holy IV of hope for your soul. Please help me welcome my guest, Judy Flumer, to the show. I'm so excited to have her here today. As you guys know, this is season 2, Launching Pioneers, and I really wanted to have her on because I believe that what she is doing here in this world is different. And it's needed. And I just want to even hear myself more about what she's doing. We haven't connected for a little while. So, Judy, could you tell us just a little bit about yourself? And then we'll kind of get into what you're up to these days.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much for having me, Kristen. This is a real blessing. And I always enjoy talking with you, just whether it's on voice texting or on the phone or whatever. So this is really special for me. Um, so a little bit about myself. I am a mom I'm a wife of 33 years as of a couple of days ago. On the 18th, we celebrated 33 years together, my husband, Philip. We have 4 grown kids, and our youngest graduated college on May the 3rd. So we're super excited about that. Whole new season for our family as we move into total empty nesting. She's still with us for a little while. She lived at home during college, but she's on the job hunt. We know that this is happening, but it's so good for her, And so we homeschooled our kids for about 17 years. And we're a unique family. We live out in rural South Carolina, right next to, I think it's wheat right now. There's a crop field. I grew up in the Houston, Texas area. So this has been a change, but I was just telling somebody today, I don't think I could go back to city life. I love it. It's so peaceful, so tranquil where we are, and a privilege to raise our kids here.
Wow.
My husband is a nuclear engineer, health physicist, and he's also a full-time pastor. So he's a physics professor at a local university, Francis Marion University, and he's also a full-time pastor. And people just think that's so strange. But to me, I don't see how you can have a science without the Bible. They are literally hand in hand because you're talking about God's creation, and physics explains how things work together. I have a master's in health physics, and that's where we met. And it goes together. You can't have one without the other because God did it. And anyway,
That's incredible. So I don't know if you're open to sharing more about it, but I honestly haven't heard of a health physics degree. Second of all, what do health physics, like, what would you do coming out of that? I mean, the fact that he's a pastor, there's a story there. I'm like, okay, tell the story here.
Okay, well, to answer your first question, so basically, health physics would be the safety side of nuclear engineering. So our job as a health physicist would be to protect the worker and the environment from the effects of radioactive material. And both of our interests were in dosimetry, or evaluating the dose or the impact that somebody would have from exposure to radioactive material. I looked at internal dosimetry. He's excellent at that, but his specialty was external. So if somebody was exposed to an external source, what would it do to your skin? How far would it penetrate into your skin? How would it affect you? Mine was if you inhaled, ingested, or were injected with radioactive material. Like if something happened and a piece of glass stuck you and, like cut your leg and it had radioactive material on it, something like that. But that's what health physics is. It's protecting the worker and the environment from the effects of radioactive material so that you can use it safely. So you might work in a hospital. Medical physics is an offshoot of health physics. So if you have radiation therapy, the person who is helping with the radiation oncologist, the person that's working with them and looking at the dose that you're getting, that's coming out of my field. It's now its own little field. But back in the day when we were in college and graduate school, that was part of what we did. You might work in the area of reactor design. They all have to have a health physicist or a research lab where radioactive material is used as a tracer. It's used a lot in research because it can attach to something molecularly, and you can measure the radioactive material by its decay and figure out what's happening to whatever you're looking at. I mean, it's used on oil wells, on rigs, anyway, it's used all over the place. So, gosh, I'm
Learned
sorry.
something new today.
So any kind of research or industry or medical universities, I mean, it's even tritium is actually in exit signs. I mean, like it's everywhere.
Well, what led you to go down that road? Just kind of going back a second.
So I have always had an interest in physiology and anatomy and how the body works. And I really seriously considered medical school. I've always had a medical aptitude, and a lot of doctors and nurses ask, "Are you medical?" I'm not. I'm not certified. I'm not licensed, but I totally understand it. Um, and so when I was in school, I knew I knew that it would be better for me not to study biology, but to study something that I could, if I ended up not going to medical school, I'd have a career field that. Um, so I chose engineering and I chose health physics because it was kind of a bridge between engineering and medicine.
Hmm.
So that's fine.
Fascinating. And your
Yeah.
husband. So you met there in school.
We
And
met in
then
graduate
what
school.
happened there? Like he's a pastor. Like
Uh-huh.
tell us more about this. Because what you do, well, you'll share more about what you do, but I love people's stories and the pathways that God leads them on.
Oh, total God things, total God things. And it's funny because okay, so I just have to tell you this little piece. We are actually now in the church that my husband attended when he was in college. His dad was a pastor, and so he had never chosen his own church. He'd always been in his daddy's church, wherever they may live.
Yeah.
And so when he went to college as an undergrad, he chose this church.
Mm.
And the pastor at the time saw something in him and he kind of mentored him. Philip was really kind of a protege. And he brought him along. And God did not call him into ministry at that time. But when we started dating, he told me, I
Mhm.
just really feel like God's going to call me. I don't know when. It's not now, but I need you to know that if we're going to be, if we're going to move forward.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, that's fine, that's great. Well, so as a young couple, as a young married couple, whenever we lived about 2.5 hours away. Well, now we were in Texas in graduate school. And when we when we looked for jobs, we interviewed all over the country.
Mhm.
And we ended up in Aiken, South Carolina, about 2.5 hours away from where we are now. And so when the pastor at the time at this church was ill or traveling or whatever, they would call Philip and ask him to fill in. And we'd drive 2.5 hours and he'd preach and we'd drive back home. And we had a little situation. The church that we were in was without a pastor for about a year. And it's a really difficult time for a church. We had an interim, but he just filled the pulpit. If you needed pastoral support, people stepped up, but we felt the crunch of not having a pastor.
Mhm.
And so this particular church that we're in now was also going through something very similar. They'd been without a pastor about a year, and they called and they said, "Listen, we need somebody to preach on Sunday." I mean, it had been a while, and they didn't ask him every week, but they called him and said, "Why don't would you be willing to come preach this Sunday?" And Philip said, "You know what? I will." He said, "Why don't I do this? I feel like you're spending all your time trying to fill the pulpit, and you guys need to go find a pastor. So I will commit to preach for you guys for 4 Sundays,
Mhm.
and you guys take that time and go find a pastor. pray over this, find the one that God's leading for you and go. And at the time, by this point, we had all four of our children. Our youngest was an infant. Our oldest was 5, maybe. There, he had just turned 5 when she was born. And so we came every week, and Philip preached, and we went home. And about halfway through the time, he was working as an engineer in a consulting firm, and he was on the rise. Like, he was literally about to take over as office manager for this firm. And I looked at him and I said, I think God's calling us. I think God's calling us to this church.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, what? And he started praying harder about it, and I started praying harder about it, but we didn't say a word to anybody at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because there were some mountains in the way, there were just some things, big barriers, more than one, that really it just didn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I've come to learn that when
key.
God is leading you somewhere and it doesn't make sense, you are almost guaranteed to be.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But that was one of those life lessons that we learned early. And so anyway, we didn't say anything. And after several weeks, one of the church board members called him and said, listen, I know this is a crazy question, but would you consider coming as our pastor? And he said, well, at this point, we'd already been praying about it. He said, well, Judy and I'll pray about it. And we did. And it was one of those, that you know.
Mm-hmm.
And even though it didn't make any sense in any way, shape, or form, you know that you know. And one of the things was, how are we going to, it's a relatively small country church. At the time, it was almost all family, maybe 100 members. We usually have about 80 on a Sunday. And he's like, how can I support a family of 6 on that salary? That was just one mountain. And the Lord blew open doors. Like, I can't even tell you the doors he opened. One of which was, the company that he worked for had never, ever had a remote employee. And this was back, this was 2001. That just wasn't done. And they came to him and said, we would like for you to set up a satellite office. Mm-hmm. Wait, what? You get to keep your job?
Wow.
I mean, that was just one thing that God did. But we've seen his hand move so many times. But I will also tell you, it was a hard move. We very much felt like home missionaries. We sold our house. We sold a lot of the contents of our house. We moved into a smaller home, an entirely new culture, at least for me. He had grown up in this, but I knew nothing. And maybe 2 weeks after we were here, I had a miscarriage. We didn't even know we were expecting, because we still had an 11-month-old. It's like, wait, what? It was a hard time. And there were a lot of challenges, but we knew that we knew that we knew. Mm-hmm. And one of the women, I'll never forget, we had a meeting with the church one Sunday night before he ever accepted the job. And one of them was like, they asked me, are you okay giving up everything you've got? Are you okay moving here? And, him not being the office manager and they were worried about our finances and us not being satisfied living on less and living in the country and learning a new way of life and all that. And I looked at her and I was like, you know what? I learned a long time ago that the cost of disobedience to God would be far worse than anything I could ever sacrifice for him. Mm-hmm. And so to me, I wasn't giving anything up. I was being obedient. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I would be much more content in his will than I would ever be outside of it. And I was like, I'm not going to be disobedient for money.
Right. Yeah.
He'll take care of it. And I didn't have a clue how,
Right.
not a clue,
Yeah.
but I knew he would, and he did, and he has.
Yeah.
And I remember dreaming with my husband when we were dating and when we were newlyweds, and he said, you know, I know neither of these would support a family, but my dream one day is to to teach at Francis Marion University and to pastor Ebenezer.
Oh.
And that's what he does. After we were here for a short while, we weren't even here a year, his professors at the university found out that he was here. And they were like, "Oh, would you come teach a class for us?" And he's like, "What?" And now he's a tenured professor. He didn't ask for the job. God just totally dropped it in his lap.
Yeah.
So he provided everything we needed. He fulfilled my husband's dreams.
Yeah.
I looked at him and said, "Well, now what are you going to do?
Right.
You're already
How do
doing
you
it."
live the dream?
Yeah.
What does that look like? Like, what is that? The question, a lot of times we encounter as maybe more analytical people, is the how.
Hmm.
And I'll never forget recently somebody saying, how equals God.
Mm. Hmm. Oh,
That's
totally.
that's it. We may not see it right away,
Oh, that's for sure.
right?
That is
But
true.
I love what you said. I think this is for somebody that, and I've experienced this myself too, where I've had to literally release something, and then that's when the receiving happens. That's
Mm.
when the doors open. That's when it's like this divine exchange, right?
Yeah.
So how about for you? So you said your husband's dreams were fulfilled. How about you? What did that look like for you?
Well, it was an adjustment.
Yeah.
When when I had the miscarriage, of course, I didn't know I was pregnant, and I got very ill. And I
Mm.
remember calling my doctor, and I couldn't find my way around these back roads. I felt so lost and confused. And he said, "Is there a store? Is there a pharmacy nearby where you can get this or that or the other?" And I remember crying and saying, "There's a truck stop 15 minutes away."
Like, well.
He just, I don't think he knew what to do with me. But
Mhm.
you know, I I literally was standing in my backyard today. I live out in the country next to a crop field, and behind the crop field there are woods
Mm.
and like a forest area. There's a little pond in my next door neighbor's yard,
Mm.
and I have this swing. I love my
Mhm.
swing. It's rusting and but I love my swing. And I go sit on my little swing and just look out over the field and the woods. And I just thank God
Yeah.
for where we live, for the people that are here. It's a community unlike I've ever known. They're truly a community, truly watch out for each other. I mean, I was picking lettuce and onions at my neighbor's house the other day. I'm like, this is so fun. They're sitting on my counter. I washed them this morning and I'm preparing them and all that. Um, it's the most blessed gift to live here. And I know the Lord brought us. I know it. And I'm so thankful that my children grew up here. Our oldest was 5 well, he had just turned 6 when we moved here. So he remembers a little bit about our home and our play groups and all the things.
Yeah.
But our youngest has not known any other home.
Mm.
It's been such a blessing, and I'm so thankful.
Yeah.
Um, but as
I
far
live
as
the dream.
what?
It sounds like I'm just imagining you sitting on your swing, like
No.
just soaking it up. And I don't know if you could speak to those who maybe don't have that, swing yet, that space yet, where they're waiting for their more.
Well, I'll tell y'all. I mean, some days it's raining. Some days, we homeschooled for 17 years, and I'm going to be real, there were hard days,
Mhm.
a lot of hard days. And I went through a major depression. I was working through huge life issues. I went through this period of time where I felt as though I had a bowling ball in my gut.
Mm.
And it goes back to some pretty significant childhood trauma. Um, there were hard days, and I had the yard, but I didn't appreciate the yard, if that makes any sense. And I didn't have the swing to sit on. And there were days when I was surviving.
Yeah.
But well, let me just share a secret that I discovered.
Yeah.
I remember thinking at the time, there's more to God than I know. There's much more to Jesus than I know. I know I should be in the Word. Like, I know all the right things to do. But the reality is, I don't want to read the Word because I don't really understand the Word. I mean, like, I remember having these thoughts as a young mom.
Yeah.
And then I remember too, I didn't even need an alarm clock until my oldest was probably 9 because he didn't sleep much and he'd get me up I've been blessed, truly blessed with 4 kids. I love these kids. I have 3 boys and a girl. They're amazing. They're so smart. They're loving. They're kind. They're just the joy of my heart. They're also all ADD.
Oh.
All of them. And some of them have processing issues and some of them, all this stuff. And if you look at them on the outside, like everybody looks at our family, goes, they're so smart, blah, blah, blah. I mean, yeah, my kids have college degrees. They all graduated with Latin honors. But
Mhm.
I'm telling you, that is God's grace and blessing on their lives. And I think part of why they're there, and I'm not saying because I homeschooled because of me, they're there. No, I'm saying because of God working through us in that home environment, we had that opportunity to pour into them and make sure they got things and didn't miss things. And they still miss things. But anyway, I don't even know where I was going with this. Oh, I didn't have to set an alarm because this child never slept.
Mm. Wow.
And so I would wake up to mama, 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 mama. And I woke up in adrenaline every day.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And I finally wisened up and said, oh, I can't do this.
Mhm.
I'm going to have to get an alarm and I'm going to have to get up before they get up
Yeah.
or I'm going to lose my mind. And so I started that. And then the Lord said, I want you to come sit with me
Mm.
and have a quiet time. And I did try to have quiet times, but I didn't have regular quiet times. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And they were sometimes later in the day if they were taking a nap or at bedtime or whatever, because I remember the conversation with the Lord. I was like, Lord, my sleep is like gold.
Yes.
I'm so tired.
Yeah.
I can't give up 15 minutes. And he was like, just give me 5.
Mm. Yeah.
So we started with 5 and I started praying. I said, Lord,
Mhm.
give me a hunger for your word. Give me a desire to read your word and help me understand your word. And I prayed that persistently. I don't even know how long. And so he did. And I started with the 5 minutes. Well, that wasn't long enough. So, okay, I got to get up 15 minutes early because I want this time with the Lord. And it stretched into, at one point, I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning
Mm.
and having these 2-hour blocks with him. And they were the sweetest times of my life.
Mm.
They were in a time when I so desperately needed, and
Mhm.
we all desperately need, but I mean, to the core
Mm.
of my being needed to be with him. I would journal notebook after notebook after notebook. I was in the word. I was worshiping. He was giving me songs. I'm not a songwriter, but he gave me songs,
Yeah.
several songs. And it was just one of the sweetest times of my life.
Yeah, that's a huge key for somebody.
Yeah. And what I learned was that while my sleep was like gold,
Mhm.
that time with him was diamonds. And
Yeah.
he always somehow multiplied my time or expanded time somehow that I got done everything that I needed to get done.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it
another
was
key.
totally him.
Like I was actually thinking about that today because I'm personally in a time where my schedule is more compact because we have a lot of moving pieces, oldest graduating high school. I mean, there's just so much happening right now.
That's
So
great.
my schedule is really compact, but yet it feels like what I was kind of attributing today was like loaves and fishes.
He does
You know,
that.
and part of it too is like giving him like the first part of our day. I shared with somebody recently, I'm like, realize I'm a bookended introvert. Like I need to be in the word before I am around people, and I need quiet time before I'm with people. And I need it at the end of the day too.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure, like with you as a homeschooling mama at that time, you were pouring out. When you're pouring out and you're pouring out and you're pouring out, we all have different ways that we pour out, but we
Mhm.
need to be poured back into, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And I mean, God provided a great homeschool community for us, but there's no replacement for him.
Yeah.
And that time, I'm telling you, that time in the morning, I mean, yes, the end of the day, I agree. It's really good. It's really helpful to circle back with him and work through what has happened that day and kind of process through it with him. But I'll tell you, starting your day with him it's
Mhm.
invaluable.
Yeah. And like you said, I share with people in different ways that I work with client wise. There's things that he might be calling us to do. Let's just say, and this is going to be just another parallel, but like if somebody is like, I need to start walking. I feel like I need to start walking, but they feel like they can't start walking because they feel like they need an hour.
Right.
I say that. I say start with 5 minutes.
Hmm.
Just give it 5 minutes. Give it 5 minutes twice a week.
Right.
And you start building into it. You start
Yeah.
feeling the experience and the benefits. How much more when you're with the Lord, with the word, with worship, with even writing in your journal? I can only imagine how much you poured out in those journals back then.
I
You
keep
probably
saying,
still are, right?
well, it's funny. He told me, eventually I'm going to write a book. It's called He Restores My Soul, and it's going to come out of those journals.
Well, there you go.
But I don't know when that's going to be.
I say too, like I know I have book babies in me, but it's not time right now. It's just
Right.
not time. And it's due time will happen. It's just not due time right now. And it's okay. But I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure you've got some books in there. That's good. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
No, they
tell
are.
us a little bit more about like where you're at right now. What are you up to? Part of why I wanted to have you on because I want to have you share what you're doing. Because part of what I do is connecting people to other people and what they're doing because I believe that, I don't do what you do and people need what you do because I don't do what you do. So I really want to elevate women of faith in this time that are doing different things. And I really believe what you're doing is very different. I've not heard, I mean, of what you're doing before, I guess, partly because maybe the season that I'm in, partly because other things, but I would love for you to just share like how did you get started? What is it? Where are you going?
Okay. So I founded College Prep Excel. The business has been going about a year, probably
Mhm.
about a year. I think officially I launched last June. I was working it from about March on. But one day when I was homeschooling, like I said, I think we schooled for about 17 years. I was walking through my living room. I remember this. I was walking through my living room and it hit me. Our oldest was in high school, and I went, oh no, I'm the guidance counselor. Oh my gosh, we don't have a high school guidance counselor. I'm the guidance counselor. And then I panicked because I went, that means if I mess up, it affects my kids. Like if I don't know something, if I have to know how this works. I have to find scholarships for them. I have to figure out when things have to be done. I felt this heavy weight. And I remember digging in. First of all, let me say, I don't think every student needs to go to college.
Yeah.
Like, I really don't believe that.
Mhm.
But God has called me to help those who do want to go to college.
Yeah.
And He's given me a different perspective coming from the homeschool background because there is a bias against homeschoolers. In some cases, homeschoolers are seen as they're recognized as advanced students because they've been taught how to learn and how to think in ways that other students haven't, really by necessity, especially if you have a family with multiple children.
Mhm.
And I have taught in the classroom. I've taught on several levels. I've every level,
Mhm.
but I learned in our homeschool, you know, I had to make my children learn more independently just because I couldn't sit down and teach physics, biology, chemistry, and earth science consecutively and
Right.
teach, all the four maths because I did bundle as much as I could together,
Mhm.
but I had to find ways for my children to learn and me to interact with them.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Okay.
Absolutely. I've always wondered how it works. My sister has 6 kids and homeschools. I'm like, uh,
Well, no, it's
I'm
really
like,
amazing.
yeah.
It really is because these children learn how to learn. They
Yeah.
do learn how to learn.
Mhm.
Well, and it's really funny. My kids, when they went to college, they were like, gosh, this is so much easier. I'm like, yes, I did it. All
Oh,
right.
love
They
it.
know. But I, gosh, I don't know. I've lost my train of thought a little bit, but I just remember feeling such a heavy weight
Mhm.
to help my kids. And I think a lot of times as homeschoolers apply, you get both ends of the spectrum. You either get somebody who's familiar with homeschooling and goes, oh, I want all the homeschoolers, they're great students, or you get somebody that goes, did their mama give them that A?
Oh.
And you hear that a lot. And this is my perspective. While I've known a lot of homeschoolers over the years,
Mhm.
I can only think of one or two families out of hundreds and hundreds who I didn't feel like did enough. But my perspective is there was a time when our daughter was sick, came out of cancer treatment with a lot of chemo brain, a processing issue. Um, and I remember talking to other moms and saying, what I'm getting at is I pushed my kids really hard, not realizing that it was so hard because they were totally able to do it.
Mhm.
I didn't realize that I was expecting more out of them, is what I'm getting at. And one of the other moms was like, you can give them a word bank
Mhm.
on this vocabulary test. I was like, to what?
Mhm.
Give them a word bank.
Mhm.
She was like, yeah, that most schools are giving their kids word banks on those. I was like, what?
Mhm.
you know, so I mean, you have to take that into consideration when I say that I thought maybe they weren't. But my point is, when a homeschool mama and daddy, when mom and dad decide they're going to homeschool their kids, they realize the buck stops with them.
Mhm.
And they love these kids more than anybody else. So there's this tremendous weight. And if you talk to any homeschool mom, they will say, I hope I'm doing enough. I thought it's almost the mantra of a homes. I hope I'm doing enough. I hope they're prepared. I'm trying so hard. I don't want to mess this up.
Yeah.
And so when I talk to college admissions counselors,
Mhm.
that's one of the things I tell them. I'm like, I can't guarantee that every grade point you see coming through is legit,
Mhm.
but I have never met a homeschool parent that didn't expect excellence, didn't operate with integrity, and didn't understand that
Mhm.
the buck stops with them and they are not willing to let their child pay a price.
Mhm.
And so, what you're going to get in a homeschool student, the vast majority of the time, is a student of excellence that has legitimate grades. But that's what led me to put together an ACT prep course because I feel like as a homeschooler, you, I don't want to say you have to prove yourself, but in some ways, I mean, you have to stand out. And I guess I started trying to help students stand out because any student, homeschool, public, private, it doesn't matter anymore. College has gotten so competitive. And if God's leading you to college, then that's great. But we all need scholarships. I don't know anybody who can just write a check for college. I know there are people out there. I'm not one of them,
Yeah.
but I feel like we need scholarships. And so when you have two students, back to the homeschooler thing, you have two students and they have the same grade point. They took basically the same classes. How do you distinguish between those two? And that's where the bias comes in. I think oftentimes that public or private school child is going to be selected over the homeschooler because they're thinking, well, I mean, do we know that they really did what they said they did? And
Right.
so I feel like it's really important to demonstrate your college readiness if you're going to pursue that.
Mhm.
And so I really encourage people to take dual credit courses. And I also really encourage them to take a test, the ACT or the SAT, but I chose ACT. I really feel like the SAT is on its way out. Um, I feel like the ACT is a better test. It covers more subjects. SAT has gone fully digital and ACT is on paper. It gives a STEM score. It's the new SAT is adaptive, so it's not even standardized anymore. You know, you get a different set of questions based on how on the second module based on how well you do on the first. And I'm just like, that's not even standard. You've got some kids getting easy questions and others getting hard.
Mhm.
So I found though, statistically, our students in the country, well, let me just give you the statistic. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Last year, 40% of the students that took the ACT did not meet any of the college readiness benchmarks. None. And I'm like, these are college bound kids taking the test. So that's very telling. And then only 1 in 5 met all four,
Yeah.
showing they were college ready. So
Mhm.
I feel like, you know, they really need ACT prep. But what I do in my prep class is different than anything I've ever seen.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I teach you tips and strategies. They're proven, they work, and they will help get your grade up, get your score up. I I think one of the things that is kind of the secret sauce. I work a lot individually with my kids in one-on-one, in groups. I mean, their parents are always looped in.
Yeah.
I tell them up front, your mama's going to be on this text, on this email, whatever. I want them to know what we're doing and what we're talking about. But
Yeah.
um, I teach them to be their own detective. And really, the course is called Unlocking the Mystery of the ACT, and they learn to break down um, and analyze their practice tests and find those knowledge gaps that we all have. There's no shame, we all have them. And people are like, I can't believe I didn't know the difference between possessive singular and possessive plural nouns, or I didn't know comma placement, or I had trouble with transitions in paragraphs. And they beat themselves up. And I'm like, hold on,
Yeah.
you unlocked a key.
Yeah.
You found a key. No, this is good. This is really, really good. We want to find the knowledge gaps because then you can go back and study that and refresh that and learn it. It'll help you on your test. You'll see the test scores come up, but it'll help you in life. Now you understand it. So, hey, this is a win.
Mhm.
Um, so I help them do that and I can coach them through when we start to see trends. I'm running out of time every time I take the reading test or, you know, whatever it is, then I'm able to coach them through that. And I see these students go from to oh yeah. And I
Yeah.
love it. I love it. But the big thing that's really, really different. I mean, that's different. The individual attention's different,
Mhm.
but I work with them on mental preparation for this test. I help them go from test anxiety to confidence. I
Mhm.
help them, like, we talk about the difference between a spirit of excellence and a spirit of perfectionism. They're big, big, big difference.
Yeah.
One leads to life and the other leads to destruction.
Right.
Um, but I also teach them life skills that they need that affect their test, but they carry throughout life. So I teach them what a goal actually is because they think they know, but they usually don't.
Mhm.
How to manage their time, how to set goals, how to achieve, you know, work toward them, how to manage their time. We talk about wellness,
Mhm.
like how you move your body, what you feed your body, the amount of rest you get, it all factors in to optimal mental performance on test day. I mean, they
Mhm.
kind of go into training a little
Mhm.
bit.
Yeah.
And so I deal with mindset and I teach them about growth versus fixed mindsets. And we
Yeah.
work through their limiting beliefs
Mhm.
and, all these things. I've never seen a class do that.
Right. Yeah.
I see such a transformation in these students and it's I just love it. I love it.
If you guys could only see Judy's face right now, she's beaming. She's radiant because she's talking about something that she loves and she's helping to unlock these kids. As you
It
guys know, it's Hope Unlocked. That's the
it
name of the
is.
podcast. She's unlocking hope in these kids. And I love that you get to, like, what I like to say, flip the script. These kids come in, they're like, oh, I didn't know this. And you're like, well, maybe you didn't need to know it, but now you will. You're taking something that felt very negative to them and
Mhm.
they walk away with hope. They walk away with these keys for life. And as you were talking about even ACT, it's kind of fun. Have has he given you, like, even an acronym for you with ACT for your business?
An acronym. I mean, not really an acronym per se. He's given me, like a kind of I don't know if it's a tagline or a log line. I don't really know the
Mhm.
difference, but
Yeah.
but kind of helping students stand out.
Mm. Yeah.
That's just the thing is they're just not cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Like when students are being evaluated, you're looking at numbers and you don't see that there's anything different about these kids. And what I tell them, and I need them to understand, I had this conversation with one of my new students.
Mhm.
She goes, I said, so what do you like to do? What do you do?
Yeah.
Nothing. I
Aw.
said, okay, listen, I want to know what is unique about you. And
Mhm.
there's nothing unique about me.
Oh my
No,
goodness.
I bet there is.
Yeah.
I know there is. I know that there's something amazing about you that's different from everybody else around you because that's how God made you. So I know there is. So as we talked, I was like, so what do you do after school? I'm just because the more I understand what motivates them, the more I can use that as I coach them I can make things relevant to them. And so it turns out this girl was like an amazing swimmer, really, really good. She had an injury, had to have some surgery, and she doesn't do that anymore. I'm like, but
Mhm.
you still have that knowledge and those patterns and all the benefit of the athletic training that you've learned all these years. It
Mhm.
still forms who you are. And I can speak to her as an athlete, you
Mhm.
know, and and then come to find out this girl, her dad has a business and she works with her business. She is amazing, I'm telling you. So he makes signs that go on businesses. Like you would see them on a business, something I'm not going to tell you the name, but you would recognize it. And she's wiring these signs after school. Like,
Wow.
wait, hold up. You are doing the wiring in these signs that are going up on that business that I drove by the other day? What? She's
Yeah.
like, yeah. I said, okay, let me just tell you, there aren't many people your age that can do that. I was like, find what makes you unique and stand out
Yeah.
and learn, go deeper in that, develop that, and follow that line
Mhm.
into adulthood.
Mhm.
Find the passions. I have a son who wanted to be a firefighter when he was in high school, and the fire department's literally 2 doors away. My husband's the chaplain, and he would go with his dad and attend these meetings. And so when he turned 18, he was still a senior in high school. He said, I'm going to take the class. I want to get certified so I can start going on calls. And so he did. He took a 120-hour class, 120 hours as a high school student, passed the class, got certified, started going on calls. So when he's applying for scholarships, I'm like, make sure you put on there that you're a
Yeah.
volunteer firefighter.
Mhm.
When you write your essays, make sure that you point out that you went on a call last night. you know, it there is something amazing about every single one of these kids that I work with. And part of it is helping them see it.
Yes. Mhm. Yep. Amen. And how many people out there, as a coach myself, like just because it's so innate in you, or maybe it's kind of gone dormant for a while, or somebody, maybe you were a really amazing dancer when you were a kid, and then somebody said something to you that kind of knocked your, off your path because you took something to heart that really, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it caused something to go dormant, but you get to come in and encourage and exhort and call them up into these places
Mhm.
so they remember who they are
Yeah.
and they can take that with them. That's invaluable. Have you seen the movie A Million Miles?
Mm-mm.
A
What is
Million
it
Miles
called?
Away.
A
Part of my
million miles.
coaching tends to be like movies. I'm like, oh wait a second, this movie. I watched this movie and I'm not going to give away the movie, but it is very rare, and maybe it's just my experience and maybe what I've seen and can potentially gather. It's very rare if you have a classroom of, let's just say kids are in public school of 30 kids. It's probably very rare that your teacher would actually sit down with you and call out the gold in you.
Mhm.
And even as I'm not a homeschooling mama, I give you guys all props for that. I think it's amazing. It was not my calling. But like you said, having multiple kids, it's hard to, sit down and to have somebody who's an outside, neutral, you're neutral.
Mhm.
And I'm imagining that they can really open up to you once you kind of break that, kind of break the shell a little bit, right?
Yeah. Kristen, I absolutely love working with these students. They
Mhm.
are, and I mean, probably half my students are public schooled,
Mhm.
or private schooled, but I'll work with anybody.
Mhm.
But I just have such a heart for homeschooled families specifically
Mhm.
because I know they don't have that support in most cases.
Yeah.
They just don't have it. And when the deadlines pass, it's too late.
Mhm.
And so you've got this student who could change the world,
Yeah.
but maybe they need scholarships and literally can't go to school without them.
Mhm.
And they missed all the deadlines because nobody told them what they needed to be doing when. And
Yeah.
so that's part of my business too is,
Mhm.
consulting with families and helping them create a roadmap that's going to get them to where they want to go and helping them understand that whole process. Yeah.
You're so right.
God blessed my family. Like I still stand in awe,
Mhm.
but all four of my kids got through without any debt.
I'm like, how
And
does that work?
yeah, it's the Lord. It's
Mhm.
the Lord. I mean, I gotta tell you, I think our oldest might have been 10, which means our youngest was around 5. I remember my husband sitting all that we had met with financial advisor and he told us what we needed to save per month per child to send them to college. And he lined them all up on the couch.
Mhm.
And he looked at him, he said, you know, your mom and I have been talking,
Mhm.
and we decided that we had to make a choice. We could either feed you now or we could save for college and
Mhm.
have enough money set aside to send you all to college when you got to that point. And we decided we ought to feed you now.
Yeah, right?
So you're
Good
going to
plan.
have to work really hard
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you're going to have to get scholarships because your mama and we can't do both. you know?
Yeah. I understand
Yeah.
more than you
And
know.
I still laugh about that because I remember they were babies.
Oh,
They're
you're
sitting
probably
on the
like,
couch
wait,
going,
what are you talking? We just want to eat. Give us food.
we have chicken
Mom.
nuggets.
We don't even know what scholarships are, but we need
Yummy,
food.
yummy.
That's adorable. Oh my gosh. Well, you are a joy, and I'm so thankful for the work that you're out there doing. If you could think of, as we talked about before, and what I always say with this podcast, as I like to say, Seedcast, to the one that's listening to you, is there anything else that you would like to say to him or her? Maybe just a word for them as they're maybe either a mama or a student? Anything else that's coming for you?
Well, Kristen and I were talking about this before we got started, but sometimes God calls you to do things that don't make sense to anybody else
Mhm.
at all.
Mhm.
It's happened over and over and over.
Mhm.
We don't have time for all the
Yeah.
stories, but I think I've learned one thing along the way. When we are obedient to God, when we're in His will, whether it makes sense or not,
Mhm.
He works it out.
Mhm.
Homeschooling our kids, there was a season where we didn't homeschool our kids.
Mhm.
Um, we had started. My mom moved here; she was terminally ill, and I couldn't juggle. I did for a year, but I couldn't juggle her needs
Mhm.
and their needs, and feel like I was doing a good job for either. And our kids went to school for a little while.
Mhm.
God opened every door, and He closed every door when it was time for us to come back home.
Mhm.
I just feel like learning to rest in Him, learning to trust Him. This business is a daily exercise in learning to trust Him.
Yes.
He led this. I'd been advising families for probably 10 years. My
Mhm.
husband and I had been talking about, there's one of me, and the need is so great
Mhm.
that maybe we need to formalize this into a business, and we need to find a way to help more than one family at a time.
Sure.
But I think it comes back to surrender.
Mhm.
It comes back to obedience. It comes back to trust.
Mhm.
And I'm constantly having to remind myself, because this this new business venture has been a big growing experience for me, but I'm constantly having to remind myself that He says clearly in His word, we all know Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord,
Yeah.
plans to give you a future and a hope.
Mhm.
But the next couple of verses get glossed over a little bit. I think we have to remember um, you will call upon me and come and pray, and I will listen, and you will seek me, and you will find me when you search for me with all of your heart. And I feel like, and the thing that he pointed out, it's funny, he and I had a conversation not too long ago, and he brought that verse to mind. And I said, "Oh, yeah, I know that verse. It's on the wall in my kitchen."
Right. Right.
It's,
Your
it's on
coffee
the
table.
wall.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, but read it again. Declares the Lord," was what jumped out at me. He's like, "Have you thought about the power of my voice?" I'm like, "Sure." And he goes, "Have you?" And I'm like, maybe. And he took me back to Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He spoke everything into being. And he used the voice that created everything around us, everything that I see when I look out my window, me, the people in my home and outside my home. That same voice that created all this is declaring and speaking over us these plans that He has for us. And so, why are we getting tied up and twisted up and not knowing what to do?
Right. Right.
When He has this plan, it's a good plan, a plan to bless us and give us a future and a hope.
Mhm.
When we seek Him with our whole heart, we find Him. He doesn't hide from us, and He hears our prayers. And so that would be my encouragement to you, is if you happen to be that person that knows you should be spending time with Him but don't want to, or whatever it is, He already knows that. Let me just relieve you of that.
Yeah.
He already knows that it's not an epiphany for Him, but it might be an epiphany for you. And I'm just encouraging you to give Him that 5 minutes and let Him speak to your heart with that same voice that He declares over you with, and the same voice that He created you with, because it's a beautiful thing. And He does have a plan for us, and He does have a plan for you, and you don't have to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Well, would you be open to praying over this woman or man potentially who is listening today? as
Yeah,
we fly out of this next this podcast today.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Father God, first, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for this. It's a beautiful day outside my window. I am so thankful for the day you've given us. I'm thankful for Kristen and for the connection you've made with Kristen in my life. I just love this woman, and thank you for her ministry. Thank you for her obedience to you, her surrender to you. It is truly encouraging to those around her, including myself. Father, I want to pray for the listeners today. Anyone that's listening to this message today, tomorrow, or whenever. Father, I just lift them up to you. Lord, I know you know their heart. You know their heart better than they know their heart. And so, Father, I just pray that you're going to whisper into them whatever truth it is that you want them to get out of this podcast. Father, if it's about the courage to start the business that you've laid on their heart, if it's about educating their kids, whether they're educating them in their own home or supporting them coming out of a school, a traditional classroom situation, because the parents are still the ones in charge. Father, whatever it is, if it's about taking that college journey with them, wherever these feelings of inadequacy come in, Lord, wherever these, I don't know what to do, or I can't do this, or I don't know how to help them, or I don't know how to help myself, or I don't know how to do whatever it is. I'm just hearing these cries as we're praying, Lord. I'm just hearing all these arguments against surrender. Father, I just pray that they would surrender to you right here, right now, that you would unclog their ears, that you would remove the barriers from their ears and help them to hear your voice. I pray that you would remove the scales, Father, from their eyes and help them to see themselves the way you see them. Help them to see others the way you see them. Father, help them to see where you're working around them. Lord, I pray that you would draw them into a closer, more intimate relationship with you. And Father, I pray blessings upon blessings on them. I pray, Lord, that they would step out in faith and take the leap to follow you and trust you in whatever way you're moving. And I just lift all this up in Jesus' name. Amen.
Judy, thank you. Thank you for being a brave voice that's setting others free. I just see so much goodness coming out of what you've shared here today. And I just thank you for being on and being brave, right? I'm going to close with our anchoring verse for Hope Unlocked. It's, may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that by the power of the Holy Spirit, you may abound in hope. Romans 15:13. And I see something happening with you.
Gotta tell you, that's my anchor verse. I have it on a pillow. Literally.
It's
Yes.
the anchor verse. Yeah, I always say
That's
it's
one of my anchor
the
verses.
anchoring verse for this podcast.
That verse, when some of the biggest challenges in my life, I mentioned my daughter's cancer treatment. Um, that verse and the other verse that has really gotten me through a lot is what is it? Psalm 27:13. I think it's, I would have despaired if I had not believed I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. But those two verses, when I'm struggling, it's funny how you'll forget about them and then the Lord will bring them back.
Yes.
But may the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that, I love the all. It's not some, it's all joy and peace in believing,
Yes.
so that tells you why, so that you may abound in hope that's overflowing by the power of the Holy Spirit. Love that verse, Kristen.
Right? And abound, like that word, even for
Yes.
me, it's like, it's boundless.
Yes.
It's limitless.
Mhm.
And being a hope igniter, I'm like, this is so perfect. Like it was for me, probably like you too. It's like when he highlights something, it's almost like it just flies off the page of the book.
Yes.
I was like, oh, this is it. So,
I love it.
well, thank you again for being on. We will share Judy's information if you want to get a hold of her in the show notes. If you have, do you have a website right now? You could just even speak it out.
Yeah, just https or www.collegeprepexcel.com. It's all one word, and it's college, prepxcel.com.
Love it. So I will link that in the show notes. I'll also link her contact information. Please reach out to her. I cannot wait to hear more. Maybe have you on again for part two. But please reach out to her to hear more about what she's doing and how she is blessing the next generation. So thank you again, Judy. I will be on with another episode next week. Have a good
Thanks
day.
for having me.
Yes, you're welcome.